Hello and welcome to another BuildASoil YouTube FAQ video. Today we've got FAQ 9 for season 6, and I think this is going to be close to the last one because we've harvested everything. Most recently I harvested even a random autoflower that was growing in a 3x3 tent. You can see that in one of the episodes. We harvested the orchid genetics out of the 4x4, and I'm really pleased with how the odors are turning out, so I can't wait to do the smoke report. So just know that the next episode is going to be the smoke report and finalizing season 6. But to round out season 6, I want to start to discuss season 7. I've got some great plans. We've got a new camera coming for season 7, so I just really want to keep improving this. And in any case, if you watch and follow along, I'm just sharing these details with you because they're important to me and it's what's happening behind the scenes. If you're brand new and you're just watching, this is the first video that you've watched. Normally what I do is Dean, who edits the YouTube videos, goes through all of the YouTube comments, select ones that make a lot of sense for me to answer on camera, helping many people, and he just sends them over to the crew. The crew prints them out here at the BuildASoil building. They bring them to me. I don't look at them. I turn the camera on. I immediately jump in. The questions are written down, and I just answer them to the best of my ability. So let's get started. FAQ 9, first question, Terpes. Terpes says, what are your thoughts on avocado tech? Would you personally try it out? Why or why not? Really good question, mainly because this is something that within our community, you're gonna see lots of different trends. And these trends sometimes are brand new and they pop up and a lot of people will try the new trend. Other times they are remnants of the phases you go through as a living soil grower. When you learn about biochar, when you learn about compost tea, when you learn about sprouted seed teas. So many of those are phases that we go through and then we adapt to our own style based on our lifestyle, where we're at in life, how big our grow is, what our preferences are. And one of the big ones that popped up for a while, I don't see it quite as much, but it's still very prevalent, is the avocado tech. For those of you that are brand new and don't know, avocado tech is where you take an avocado, you cut it out, and there's many methods, but essentially you're taking the avocado and you're hollowing the avocado material out and mixing it with soil amendments, filling it back up, almost like making a deviled egg, right? And you're putting it back in the avocado shell. And then you put this avocado half with the mixed soil amendments and avocado face down onto the top of the soil. And what that does is that attracts the worms to it. They break down all of those nutrients and then they push them back into the soil or they pull them back down into the soil. And I'm sure that it probably works really well because you got good organic soil amendments. You have avocado, which has fats and all these other things in it that are really healthy. And you're feeding the worms with it and they're bringing that back into the soil. Now here's where we start to talk about, do I want to do it? Should I do it? Okay. Avocados, I love them. They're expensive. We want to get real weird. There's like a mafia war in Mexico on the whole thing. It's kind of crazy. But let's say there's no politics and it's like, are avocados good or not? I personally love avocados. I think it's one of the healthier fats that we can consume. I eat a lot of them. I normally can't keep them in the house. So for me to take an avocado that's expensive, farmed, brought in, sold at the grocery store through the conventional system, because I can't grow them here, or I don't, cut it open, and then feed it to my soil, I'm just like, I'm down with the amendments, I'm down with the worms, I even get the avocado, but I prefer to go wild harvest if I'm gonna be feeding plant material, so that it's locally sourced, it's fast growing, I'm getting the growth tips of the plant if I'm harvesting them for all those growth hormones. So I'm not gonna say I wouldn't do it. I see no harm. I think avocado is great, I think mixing soil amendments is great, I think worms are great. But personally, to buy the avocado and to use it, I'd rather just eat it. I will put my soil amendments mixed with worm castings or not onto the soil and the worms will consume it and bring it down and I'm still feeding them. And so to me, it's just adding avocado as a new food source. And I think what's really unlocked this as something that is fascinating within our community is because it's got a visual component. And I've noticed this when we first started using bokashi as a top dress instead of for composting. You would see the white fuzzy growth and people were fascinated by that and it opened their eyes to a bigger world that's normally unseen. And I think that's why people love seeing it. With avocado tech, you do something that is natural and clean and it makes sense. And then when you lift it up, you can see hundreds of worms in there and you get like confirmation that it's happening. And I think it's really a cool part of our ecosystem is to just observe it and explore it. And so people will do avocado tech. Another method is to put like a worm feeder tube where you have like a PVC pipe with holes cut into it, maybe 6 inch, buried, into your soil bed and you feed food scraps in there, and it allows the worms to come in and go out of the soil bed into those zones. So many areas or many things could be done similarly. As far as the actual question, would I personally try it? Why or why not? Yes, I would personally try it, but I personally haven't, just because of the reasons that I stated before. But I want to make it clear, I don't think there's anything really wrong with it. I love it. We went down a whole bunch of weird rabbit holes there. So Alice has the next question. FAQ, I assume as you are drying in the main tent, there are no issues with having the soil beds in there. I've been flirting with the idea of living soil for a while, but only have one space to grow and dry, and what are your thoughts? Okay, this is another really good question because lots of people probably wonder this. I wondered it as well, and I don't think there's a perfect answer. But here's what I'll discuss. If you are growing in your space and you want to dry it, there's two concerns. One is, will putting my flowers that I was growing hanging above my soil somehow contaminate the flowers as they dry? I don't think so. It was along that soil the whole time it was growing. I'm no longer irrigating. I'm not blowing the fan at the soil. I'm not kicking up dust in there. And so I don't see why having those beds of soil in the same grow room would be problematic. I personally haven't experienced any reasons. Now, on a commercial scale, I can imagine just with all that money on the line, you wouldn't want to introduce any possibility, right? So there's always these two thoughts. As a home grower, if it's your own space and you're not going to go kick up dirt and you're smoking it, it's like, I feel very comfortable hanging it above my soil without any issues. I know a lot of people that would do flip tech, like those 4x4 Scrog screens we used to sell, the metal screens. They're so hard to ship, but they work well. And what you would do is you'd cut the plants underneath and literally just flip it and hang it above. And you would have above the same beds you grew in, you could be drying. Now, that means you're not growing now. So if you had a separate dry room, you could dry by setting up a drying tent, controlling it with like a NEWA or maybe with the EcoWit system or any of the automation systems, some sort of smart plug. You could just run a dry tent separately and then you could be growing again. So as long as you harvest enough to shut your grow down for a couple weeks while you dry, I don't see any personal reason why you can't just use the same grow space. What I've found is I like it better when I have a separate grow space. So this season, we just had too much yield. So the 4x8 tent was completely packed full, and I had to put, that's my drying tent, I had to put some of the herb into the 10x10 just so that I didn't overfill my drying tent. So that's the reason that we did it. All right, next one, Pat. Hey, Jeremy and BuildASoil crew. I'm starting my first worm bin, and a question came to me while I was adding moisture to the bedding. Besides the little bedding the worms traveled in, most of my material has not been inoculated. I want to use some Rootwise Microbe Complete left over in my Chapin, but there was also some Kuyaha. Certain saponins are being studied and classified as toxic. These will agitate worms and drive them to the surface. One of the protocols for dealing with the invasion Asian jumping worm is to water with chamomile tea or extract it and then wait for the worms to come to the surface and either handpick them or let them fry in the sun. While I would like even moisture in my worm bin, I decided not to use the Q for now, but I was wondering if you had any thoughts. Thanks for all you do for the community. This is another, they're all really good questions. This is a good one. So when you do research, the other concern with saponins is fish. And what I found interesting about Kuyaha in particular is that Kuyaha is sold to fisheries because it increases yield. So I'm guessing there's a toxic level, but to be actually using it for fish when we're worried about fish toxicity with normal saponins, I just found it fascinating. Nature always breaks these down into gray area, right? It's neither bad nor good. It just kind of depends. Now, from my little research, which I want to encourage you to do your own, the yucca extract was actually harsher on the fish where the Kuyaha wasn't. And I don't know if it's because of the shape of the steroidal saponins and the different structures that are possible, or if it's just different research. So that would be worth investigating. Personally, I've used the Kuyaha in a worm bin and I've had absolutely no issues. So I wouldn't be worried about it. I think something's going on in soil where it's like devoid of air, it's clay, it's regular like agronomic topsoil, not potting soil or bedding. And you're using a saponin on like a clay worm, not a composting worm. And they come out of the ground probably for those combination of reasons. I've even heard it being used on golf courses, but in my little experiments with using it on my worm bin, using it in all my living soil beds, I see nothing but thriving worm populations and none of them evacuating at the regular doses that we use. So that's my advice, and I hope that it helps you. And I hope that it helps other people as well, because one of the big things that we're concerned with at BuildASoil is when we're doing a benefit for the plant, like an inoculant or a Kuyaha, or if we have something that's for integrated pest management, or it's something to actually be an organic pesticide, we don't want to have like problems with bees or worms or other other side effects, right? So those are all very, very good questions. And I can tell that you follow the BuildASoil way because those are the things that you should be thinking about when you're introducing new materials to your grow. Okay, next one, Jeff. Why does this work so well? Week 2 of veg with using the new Build-A-Veg aminos, and wow, what a difference. Oh, that's great to hear. It's a new product, and I'll tell you why I use it, and it might help you understand why it's working for you. But I don't know enough about your grow. I don't know if you replaced it with something else that you were using, or this is your first experience using an amino product. If it's your first experience, I think you're just seeing the result of the highly available amino acids and what it does for plant growth, especially in the vegetative state. While there are some people that say too much nitrogen can be a health problem for plants, I think that using amino acids, like compared to the human diet, a lot of people will say too much protein is a problem. I personally have lived off straight protein for weeks at a time with zero issues, and I know people that do it for a long time. So there's always extremes, and then there's exceptions to the rules, but typically when you use an amino acid, you see a boost in growth. And whether it's that it conserves energy that the plant no longer has to use to create those amino acids to do the next jobs, or whether it just boosts its growth by directly absorbing those nutrients, either way, I do see the same thing as you. I see phenomenal response. Now, here's where I prefer to use it. I like to have a plant that's healthy in enough soil. I almost like to let it do its own thing with maybe a couple of boosts with like Build-A-Veg. But where I really like Build-A-Veg is if it's a small container and I know it's not going to be enough and I don't want to transplant, I can then sort of feed the old feeding the plant paradigm, and it seems to do really well. Also foliar sprays. So like if you have an outdoor grow, a lot of times the plants grow so fast in a day, you can increase your one grow for the year that's outdoor by boosting it with some Build-A-Veg foliar spray in the morning. Something about giving it all its energy in the morning versus pest management's better at night. Those are part of the reasons why it works. The other, I think, are the ingredients. So if we break down Build-A-Veg, I would bring home my favorite products and I'd mix them together. And a lot of times, you know, when you own the shop, it's fine. You just bring products home. But even for me, the cost of certain ingredients are more than others. And it's like, man, do I really want to buy 5 different bags to bring home, 6 different bags just to make my little Build-A-Veg concoction? And so kind of selfishly, I was like, well, let's just mix this, then I can use it. And I think my customers will find benefit from the same problem it solved for me. And so Pure Protein Dry was shared to me by Kevin from Rootwise. We actually followed both owners of the company and went to another protein product and back to Pure Protein Dry over the years. If you followed us, you'll remember that. It was actually Thrive, I think. It's weird because we have a different Thrive now. Small world. But the Pure Protein Dry is freeze-dried fish aminos. It's a single ingredient product. It's like freeze-dried sushi for your plants. Like it's got the entire ocean of elements in it, all the micronutrients, high amount of amino acids. It's just normally very expensive. So mixing that with other products makes it a lot more cost effective. And so I would often use the amino acid regular from soy, but not just American soy, because most of it is tainted with GMO. So we go import it from Spain, and it is high quality, organic, non-GMO from another country, really likely to be the cleanest amino acid product we can find. And we paired that with the fish, so you're getting the best of both worlds. The next thing that we did is we wanted to make sure that we had a diversity in nutrient source. So we went with Organics Alive. They've got water-soluble nutrients that are made as a fermentation byproduct, where they feed microbes organic sugar until they produce energy compounds, and then they dry them and turn it into a powder. And so we've got their nitrogen-specific Organics Alive microbial fermentation byproduct powder mixed with the aminos, mixed with the Pure Protein Dry. And so you're just hitting so many different levels. When it comes to holistic organic nutrition, like diversity and having that whole range of elements there, I think is more important than trying to find the cheapest ingredient that hits one element with a nail on the head. That's like the Western philosophy where you're trying to solve the problem instead of just give it everything and let it do its own. So, long-winded answer to a simple question. That's why I think it's making such a big difference. I'm really glad you enjoy it. Beck has the next question. Beck says, how long does pollen last in an open room if the grow is accidentally pollinated? Will the pollen still be in the room the next grow, or am I overthinking it? You're overthinking it, but to make sure, just spray the room down with water. So I can't answer the first part of the question because it depends on the humidity in the room, the airflow, number of different things to determine if that pollen's still viable. But if you're just worried about viable pollen, We literally grew a 4x4 with males in it next to the 10x10 on a YouTube series. It had no cross-pollination, pollinated in that same tent. And part of the trick that we do is once we're done pollinating and I want to turn the fans back on, we spray the whole room down with water just to make sure that any pollen that was not received by the plant doesn't pick up and blow in the air and then pollinate other areas of the grow. So water will terminate the pollen, and that's all you have to do. So thanks for asking. Thomas says, hi Jeremy. What's up, Thomas? Are there ways to reduce the stretch in the first few weeks of flowering? For example, less watering, less nutrients, less or more light, less humidity or temp, fewer plants in the tent so they have more space to the side. A bit of stretch is desired, but 5 to 6 inches between internodes is probably unnecessary. I want as many flowers as possible directly under the light. Scrogging is great, but only if you have space to the side. What are your experiences? Interesting. So with scrogging, you can actually scrog it so it's under the screen before you flip the flower. And as it jumps, you can tuck it under the screen. Now, I know what you mean, only if you have space to the side. So you're trying to get some vertical space out of it, but limit that height. A lot of that's going to be genetic. So some genetics will stay really squat. Broader leaves typically, right? Really big leaves will stay very squatty, tight internodal spacing. I typically like the stretchier ones because I can flip them much sooner with less veg time, get them to stretch a lot and then fill in with a lot of weight. And so there are things. You can definitely do some research. You can look at using like more blue light to keep the stretching down. I think that if you were to water slightly less, you'd probably reduce that stretch amount, but I'm not an expert on that subject. I've not like run a commercial grow and implemented these steps and said, yes, this genetic normally stretches 3 feet and it only stretched 1 foot by doing these things. What I know is kind of anecdotal. So I prefer to just say, I don't know exactly, and that for sure it's possible. There are things that you can do, but I think the best thing that you can do is genetic selection really, really helps with limited space. Otherwise, you can rethink the way that you're scrogging, how long you're vegging, and a number of those things. You can use a second screen so that you can, instead of bending it under the first completely, you can bend different directions and pinch, LST. I understand you want as many nugs as possible under the screen, and a lot of that when you're trying to maximize yield in a smaller space really is genetic selection. If you just want to go through lots of different flavors without expectation of that stretch or yield, it's really, really rewarding, but it can totally fuck up your yield if you're relying on a certain stretch profile. So wish I could answer it better, but that is my take on it. All right, Rich from the Discord, what's up, man? Really been trying to get into the Discord more, and I have some great ideas, so it's really cool to see Dean putting questions from the Discord in here. Today, behind the scenes, I just posted about season 7, some of my ideas, because I'm really excited. I came up with a good idea, I think, but it's just the beginning. And so I'm asking everyone on Discord for feedback, and I really enjoy the conversation. So if you haven't checked out the Discord, the only way to access is through the Patreon. The Patreon's not active. That's just how you get in, and the Discord is very active. So check that out. We'd love to see you over there. Rich from Discord says, okay, so first run in an earth box. Anyway, I took down the pipe to check for water. Oh, I looked down the pipe. I was like, don't take it out. I looked down the pipe to check for water, and I see lots of roots down there. My question is, when I harvest and cut the stalk, do the roots down there just rot away? And is that okay for the next round? I see you do no-till runs, so it must be fine, but please explain if you can. I love that you asked this question because I had the same concern. And I will tell you, when I first started using the earth box, I thought, I'm just not gonna no-till these. Who cares? I'll just dump them and I'll re-amend them. But I had to know. So I started no-tilling them. And after several cycles, when I dump it out, I didn't find lots of roots in the bottom, even though I'd see the roots while it was growing. So I believe what's happening is they're air pruning in between. And by the end of the cycle, it's not like it's full of roots. It was just sending down small amounts of new feeder roots, and they end up air pruning and dying off. And somehow they're consumed in the system. Now, there is residual material in the bottom of the earth box. I think that's why there's probably a cap on maybe 3, 4, 5, 6 cycles in an earth box. And there's also arguments over whether the second, third cycle are as good as the first cycle when you do a no-till, even though you can, should you? I think you should, and I think you can no-till earth boxes, but they are different in the sense that you mound them, you have to scrape stuff off, there's a reservoir. So I think the duty to keeping the res eventually clean will limit the total number of back-to-back runs that you can do versus like a 4x4 bed, but they're so powerful. It's hard not to ask these questions. And so for what it's worth, I've not seen, in my personal experience, any problems with the roots that are growing down there. When I see it, it makes me happy because I know the earth boxes are doing their job. And then when I replant for no-till, I just don't worry about it. And multiple cycles back to back, dumping it out, I didn't notice like that it was full of roots or anything crazy. So hopefully that helps answer your question. Okay, Ion from Discord. What's up, bro? Would you reuse soil if one of your plants had bud rot, 5 to 10 gallon bahots? Yes, no concern. To me, bud rot is a ubiquitous, meaning in nature, certain bacteria is just everywhere. And I first learned this when I was trying to make pickles or sauerkraut. And I'm thinking, surely I have to go online and buy a starter, because you can't just put cabbage in a jar, right? Or pickles in a jar. That's not how it works. And so what I found is that you just use salt. And what the salt does is it kills the bad bacteria and it allows the lactic acid to thrive. And the lactic acid, where did it come from? It was everywhere. It was already on the cabbage. It's in the air. When Coot taught me about sourdough, he told me that people would sell the famous San Francisco sourdough starter. But by the time you make bread with that starter in another state, it takes in the bacteria in the air, and it eventually just becomes your starter, not a San Francisco. And so for those reasons, I don't think the bud rot, that's kind of a ubiquitous bacteria, is going to cause any concern. It's probably always around. That being said, what causes it to infect the buds is that you had some condition that was wrong. What I mean is, if it's even slightly off and you have huge nugs, it can be a problem. So sometimes I'll take the biggest nugs off and I'll dry them separately if I'm really worried about it. Otherwise, where I've seen this happen is it actually starts at the end of the grow and you don't know it while the plants are alive. And it happens because it's either too hot during the day when the lights are off, or too hot at some point and the moisture creeps either in phases or all the time, and it starts to kind of sweat it out. And either that or there's lack of airflow. And that in the bigger buds will start to create the botrytis inside the bud. And then when you go to hang it, it starts to spread under those drying conditions, where if you get it chopped right, there's none in the bud, you inspect it all first, like go look at your biggest nugs first, and you'll get an eye for it. If you see any of that lighter color, anything that looks like it's a remnant, separate those bigger buds out of your dry room while you dry, and that'll help. But I would not be worried about the soil. So maybe we'll do more talk about bud rot, but I would absolutely reuse the soil. I wouldn't even think twice about it. Okay. HX says, can you use sheep wool compost for a slow release of nitrogen and water retaining? I do not know. I don't see why not. So I'd imagine that the sheep wool is probably going to have some sort of benefit. I know that like people use feather meal from chickens and all sorts of stuff that is high nitrogen that I would never suspect. I bet you the sheep wool is probably in a similar range. I would have to look up what nutrients it's for, and can you use sheep wool compost. So it's already composted. So I would want to look at what they added to the compost pile to make it a finished product. But I don't see why not. Good compost is good compost. And so as long as your compost is not super low pH, super high pH, super full of sodium or anything weird, I can't imagine it causing problems. The other thing is you want finished compost. You don't want something with a really wide nitrogen, carbon to nitrogen ratio that's not finished, because it can start to rob nutrients from your soil as it starts to get broken down into your soil. So that would be what I would look for, but I have no personal experience with sheep wool compost. However, it sounds like a great idea, meaning like I doubt you want to spray chemicals on your sheep if they're grass fed and they're being grown clean, and you have waste as a byproduct that goes into the compost from running the sheep operation. I mean, what a good source. So if it works, let me know. Maybe send me an email to jeremy@buildasoil.com. I'd like to learn more. Jaybird, how do you feel about neem cake, Jeremy? Oh man, I'm gonna start revisiting all these old things, because I forget, 10, 11, 12 years down the line, we've talked so much about neem cake, and it's just been years. And so neem cake is a phenomenal product, part of the Ayurvedic medicine. Coot shared with it because of experience with India and some of the products like the neem oil versus the neem cake. We also offer Karanja cake, and there's heated arguments about the subject. We could do just a whole episode. There was someone out there trying to say that neem cake was like ruining your soil, and Coot was sharing all the opposite information. Somebody was saying neem would ruin the fungus in the soil, where you can literally grow mushrooms using neem cake. So there's lots to discuss. The other thing that crept in, neem is a phenomenal product. It's old school, and there's a wide disparity in quality of neem. Most of the neem on the market is shit. The neem that we get, very, very high in its active constituents. But part of what tainted neem is this conversation that neem causes cannabis hypermesis syndrome. And I think it's complete horseshit. But originally where it came from was people using not neem, but neem extracts that are highly adulterated. Many of the products on the market have been found with other pesticides in them, and people were spraying on the plants because it's not neem oil. It's like a pesticide made from it. I believe some of those may have been some of the culprits for cannabis hypermesis. The other thing is, some people have a problem with cannabis hypermesis regardless of what's going on. So that correlation, causation over the last decade, I think NEEM has nothing to do with those problems, but it's been lumped in a little bit, and I think that's why you see less discussed about NEEM. Also, NEEM oil is kind of gross, and so I think people just don't want to hear about it. The other reason why NEEM got a bad name, people would spray it on their flowers, which is like a no-no. And then hash extractors were seeing NEEM oil used even in early flower, causing problems in hash. And people were like, "Fuck it, I'm just not going to use it." Plus, there's been some really good products on the market that we offer, like EM5, OrganiShield, enzyme products like Tweetment. They all work so well that people have to rely less on the NEEM oil. But man, NEEM oil, Captain Jack's, the old go-tos, like we started using NEEM oil with AgSil 16H, the potassium silicate from BuildASoil, to emulsify it. Or you could just use the Kuyaha. But something about that, like nails powdery mildew, really knocks back pests and problems, and it's totally organic and natural. So I believe in NEEM oil. It's just that as part of this FAQ, we're gonna have to separate that out. That could be like an entire video just on what are the arguments with NEEM, what's the history, what does Coot think, what do other people think, because that's really unwrapping a big one, opening a big can of worms. So Jaybird, that's some basic insight. If everyone on this episode wants to hear more about NEEM and do a discussion, I'd love to do that. I just don't know if people want to hear it, so let me know. Charlie asks, 14 days in on a hang dry of 2 plants, 30 inches, 60-60 room temp, no nug snap yet. Different size nug. Should I let hang another day or longer? Absolutely. 16 days is about the minimum for me. At 14, I start investigating. But here's the thing. Some plants, like I'll notice, they'll just be snappy at 16 and some will never do it. And so I start to lower the humidity past 16 days to like 58%, 55%, somewhere where I can guide it into a snap and then move on to the next stage, where I will put them in tubs to reduce the air that's moving around them and preserve that integrity and quality. But just know that this is an art, it's not a science. And so at a certain point, you have to kind of guide that in. But just know that in your jar, 60% is probably perfect. So some genetics at 60 will just take a long time to get to that stem snap. And it will not always be all of the stems. Some of the hollower, thinner ones might snap right away, where some others may not. And so as you get more experience, you'll learn based on where you chose and timed this. But when you get the stem snap, don't go straight into the jar. Go into tubs, go to your trimming process. Make sure you buy just a little bit more time before it's put in the jar, and I think you'll have it just right. So that's my advice. Otherwise, that lowering the humidity in stages can help you guide it slowly in to where you get that stem snap. Just don't do it too aggressively. Don't like drop it to 0, because if you forget for 1 day to check on it, it could be a problem. So let's see. So I've got 2 more, all right? So Obsidian, for next season, could you do something like only having a budget of $500 to do a grow, start to finish, starting with nothing? Man, that's a good idea. We're not gonna do that the next grow. I'm gonna do a sea of green. I'm going to pack more plants than ever before in less space to show you how I personally like to do it. But I like this idea, and we have like a 4x4 tent. So maybe what I could do is maybe start something from scratch, including equipment and everything, and do like a budget grow. I will say the typical BuildASoil grower is not on a total budget grow. Usually they're at a point in their life where herb is very important to them. And so the replacement cost for how much they smoke is typically more than 500 bucks. And even if they don't spend it at once, they're usually willing to invest a little more as they get ramped up to replace what they were spending on herb. But man, when I first started growing, I would literally go to the grow store and I would say, hey, next paycheck, can I pay you because I need that light? I need to open up space in my other tent. And I would literally paycheck by paycheck, penny by penny, get the next piece of equipment and, you know, share a little bit of the flour, help pay for the next round. So I get it. And I would definitely be open to it. It's just not what we're gonna do next round. So we'll consider it for the future. And last one says, PS from Dean. I'll be traveling to Germany soon. If anyone has any tips or tricks, please drop a comment. On April 1st, 2024, Germany legalized cannabis, so people over 18 are allowed to own and carry 25 grams of cannabis for consumption and smoke it in public places. Also, FYI, 10% of all BuildASoil YouTube audiences comes from Germany. Thank you, Germany. That is so rad. Dean, I had no idea. I'm stoked that you're going to Germany. I'm stoked that it's legal, and part of the reason I'm wondering if you feel the same, like, I like traveling, but I'm like, man, go somewhere where they behead you or put you in prison for weed, I'm out. Like, it's gonna be a problem for me. And so I love hearing things like this. If you guys have some tips for Dean, please load them up. Otherwise, that concludes FAQ 9 for season 6. I promise, smoke report from season 6 coming soon. Full plans for season 7 coming soon, and we're gonna get this thing kicked off. As always, like, subscribe, tell your friends about this stuff. Literally, we're shadow banned. We can't do social media. So the YouTube thing really helps when you share these videos, when you subscribe. So do that, and I will see you on the next BuildASoil video.